Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 words that don't really mean anything. If the omniscient tome known colloquially as the Big Old Book of Words for Nerds, and officially known as the dictionary, is to be believed, every word located within the well-worn pages of this bastion of the English language means something. But actually, there are a bunch of words many of us use every single day that don't actually mean a darn thing. These words are often just pulled straight out of the air or created by a committee of ad men in crisp, pristine suits, purely in order to sell a product. Thanks to years and even centuries of frequent use, many of these wholly made-up words have since entered into the popular lexicon and continue to be used in conversation and commercials today. Since language is an ever-evolving beast, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it sure stands as a testament to the power of human ingenuity that most people don't realize the only meaning any of the following words have is the meaning that we have since ascribed to them. Number 10. Wi-Fi was made up because the real word wasn't catchy enough. It's commonly asserted that the word Wi-Fi stands for wireless fidelity, much in the same way that Hi-Fi stands for high fidelity. Which does kind of make sense, but according to one Dr. Alex Hills, who is partially responsible for the creation of the first Wi-Fi networks in history, that is simply not the case. The word Wi-Fi was instead something wireless engineers coined solely for marketing reasons. Hills says the name was needed because the technical specification for the newly created wireless networks, called IEEE 802.11, didn't exactly roll off the tongue. To be fair to Dr. Hills, he kind of has a point, and it's hard to imagine the technology would have caught on with such an unintuitive and lame-ass name. In his book Wi-Fi and the Bad Boys of Radio, Hills recalls that the members of the emergent wireless industry chose the word Wi-Fi mostly because it sounded catchy, though he does note the natural link between hi-fi and Wi-Fi probably did help cement it in the minds of the public. You know, even though the two words have absolutely nothing to do with each other and are in no way linked. Number 9. Haagen-Dazs was made up by a guy at his kitchen table. According to Ruben Matus, the original creator of the Haagen-Dazs brand, he came up with the now iconic name of his pillowy soft ice cream after spending several hours saying nonsense words aloud until he found one that sounded neat. Purported to be a Danish word on early Haagen-Dazs packaging, the packaging even included a map of Denmark because lying to your customers apparently wasn't illegal back then. And no, the word has no translation in any language, especially not in Danish. Indeed, this is something that anyone remotely familiar with Danish can tell you at a glance because the language doesn't make use of umlauts. Matus, a Polish Jew, would later note that he chose a name that sounded Danish to the untrained ear as a subtle tribute to the country of Denmark, which he greatly respected for its many World War II-era efforts to save the Jews from persecution. That said, Matus would also later note that the name was chosen to make it stand out to consumers, reasoning that a foreign-sounding name suggested an intangible air of quality to his ice cream that consumers would innately pick up on when browsing store shelves. Number 8. Idaho was a word someone pulled out of thin air. According to historians, the name of the potato state has no meaning in any known language, and it was, as far as anyone can tell, just a made-up word suggested by early territorial representative for the area named B.D. Williams. The story goes that long before Idaho was called, well, Idaho, someone proposed naming it Jefferson. Republicans voted against this idea, and Williams instead suggested Idaho, claiming that it was an old Indian word meaning gem of the mountains. Almost immediately, this was debunked by Oregon Senator Joseph Lane, who correctly asserted no Indian tribe in the nation has that word. It is a corruption, certainly, a counterfeit, and ought not to be adopted. Amazingly, even after Williams acknowledged that Idaho was a made-up nonsense word, likely coined by his predecessor George M. Willing, it still caught on. So much so that the people of the proto-state began using it anyway, applying the name to both a steamboat and a mine, among other things. Before long, the word had entered the collective consciousness to the extent that even though people knew Idaho didn't mean anything, they still voted for it being the official name of the new state. Yep, apparently history's just fun like that sometimes. Number 7. SOS doesn't mean anything, which is kind of the point. While many assume that SOS stands for Save Our Souls or Save Our Ship or something similar like that, the truth is that the abbreviation doesn't really stand for anything, which, as Reader's Digest handily points out, is kind of the point here. To explain, as you may or may not know, the universal signal for distress in Morse code is 3 dots, 3 dashes, and then a further 3 dots. It was officially introduced in 1905 by the German government. This sequence of signals is difficult to misinterpret, and it's easy to recognize even to an untrained idea. This was seen as being incredibly important, as it allowed ships in foreign waters to signal that they were in need of help without having to worry about a language barrier. Not having a universal language for distress was a major problem before the SOS signal was introduced. Now, technically, this signal can be expressed in a number of ways, with IJS, SMB, and VTB all resulting in the same string of dots and dashes when expressed with Morse code. However, SOS eventually won out simply because it was so visibly distinctive, and the fact that it can be read from any direction, allowing stranded sailors to additionally type SOS out with rocks and other materials. Number 6. Zumba was made up over lunch in a single afternoon. A popular misconception about the popular power-posing dance exercise classes known as Zumba is that the word has its roots in Spanish. Now, this is partially true, but not really. You see, prior to being known as Zumba, the fitness program was known as Rumba-size, a portmanteau of rumba, which means to party in Spanish, and Jazzercise, a similar exercise program popular in the 90s. Maybe ask your parents about it. Problems arose, though, when the creator of Zumba, Alberto Perez, tried to trademark the term and found that it had already been registered by the owner of a gym he taught Rumba-size classes at. Undeterred, Perez and his business partners whiled away an afternoon riffing on the word rumba to find something that hit the ear just right. The word they eventually settled on, as you can probably guess, was Zumba. On its own website, the Zumba company openly acknowledges that Zumba is an arbitrary and fanciful word that they made up, which hasn't stopped people assuming that it must mean something in at least one language. Number 5. Ginsu was invented to make knives made in Ohio seem Japanese. Ginsu is a word made famous by a bunch of cheesy commercials from the 1980s designed to do one thing and one thing only: sell whoever was watching some fancy overpriced knives. Although the commercials played into the katana-like sharpness of the knives and leaned heavily into Japanese imagery, including using fonts seemingly ripped straight out of a Japanese B-movie about ninjas, all Ginsu knives are designed and manufactured by the Scott Fetzer Company in Ohio. According to a Washington Post profile of the man who coined the word, Arthur Schiff, this was a deliberate decision made to convince the public that no matter how many knives they already owned, Ginsu knives were something special. As an aside, Schiff often claims to have coined the word in his sleep and never once revealed what, if anything, it was supposed to mean beyond sounding sort of Japanese. The same can be said of Schiff's partners in the Ginsu empire, Edward Valenti and Barry Bescher, the latter of whom would reportedly respond to the question, "What does Ginsu mean?" by smiling and stating, "I never have to work again." Number 4. Kodak was made up by a guy who loved the letter K. Given the multitude of advancements to the world of camera technology Kodak as a company is responsible for, you wouldn't be remiss to think that the word Kodak itself has some deeper meaning. For example, one popular theory is that the word Kodak is an onomatopoeic representation of the sound of a camera shutter when you take a photo, or perhaps a nod to the fact that you could use an especially large one of their cameras to fend off an aggressive bear. Which, while nice, is a load of bunk because according to Kodak itself, the founder of the company, George Eastman, basically pulled the name out of his butt. Eastman is said to have come up with the word Kodak when he was playing anagrams with his mother. He settled on Kodak because he really liked the letter K. And no, this is not a joke. Eastman often described the letter K as a strong, incisive sort of letter, acknowledging this by making sure his company name contained not one, but 2 Ks. Eastman also settled on the name Kodak because he reasoned that it was simple enough to never be mispronounced and was distinctive enough to not be mistaken for another word. Number 3. Halitosis was made up to sell you mouthwash. Halitosis is a condition that is supposedly characterized by atrociously bad breath. But here's the thing, there is no such thing as halitosis. It was a made-up medical condition coined by the owner of Listerine in the 1920s. The most popular version of the story behind this word is as follows. After failing to market Listerine as everything from an antiseptic to a cure for gonorrhea that you could also use to scrub your floors, no really, company owner Jordan Wheat Lambert decided to change tack and market his product as a cure for bad breath. To convince the public they needed Listerine, Lambert scoured the dictionary and happened upon an old Latin word meaning breath, halitus. He then decided to stylize this as halitosis to make it sound like a legitimate medical condition. The company then ran a series of ads claiming that halitosis, which they defined as unpleasant breath, was a chronic problem plaguing America, for which there was only one cure. Number 2. OK was probably coined as a joke. According to the Smithsonian, the origins of the word okay aren't entirely clear, but a common and highly plausible theory is that it was coined as a joke and it has no definitive meaning. Specifically, it's purported that a writer for the Boston Morning Post created the word during a satirical article about spelling in 1879. Said article suggested that OK was an acronym for All Correct, a deliberate misspelling of All Correct. It suggested that this somehow struck a chord with the public and it entered the popular lexicon. Although this is by no means the only possible origin of the word, with some theories suggesting it may have originated in Europe or perhaps the Middle East, aptly named etymologist Alan Reed is known to have spent years trying to trace the origins of OK and put this particular theory forward as one of the most plausible. Number 1. Corinthian leather doesn't mean anything and was made in Jersey. Many people assume, somewhat understandably, that the modifier Corinthian in the phrase Corinthian leather is used to describe a hyper-exclusive kind of leather, perhaps something manufactured by blind monks with impossibly soft hands in a small Spanish village somewhere in the heart of rural Europe. As it turns out, the leather was actually from a factory in Jersey, and the phrase was something thought up by an ad executive to make the Chrysler Cordoba sound cool and exotic. To further hide the true origins of the leather, Chrysler hired actor Ricardo Montalban to be the spokesman for the car. Apparently this was because the words Corinthian leather sounded great in his Spanish accent. For years, the company and Montalban himself refused to admit what, if anything, Corinthian leather was supposed to mean. That was until the actor was asked point-blank during an interview with Letterman to spill the beans, prompting him to sheepishly admit that it meant absolutely nothing. So I really hope you enjoyed that video, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for brand new videos every day of the week. Also, I've got another channel, it's called Biographics. It's biographies of notable people from the present day, as well as history from Elon Musk to Osama bin Laden. You can check it out through the icon on the screen now. But if you want something else to watch right now, why not check out another TopTenz video or a Biographics video over there on the right. And as always, thank you for watching.